The letter from the HOA was supposed to scare me. Instead, it made me laugh. It arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, sitting in my mailbox between a grocery coupon and a hardware store flyer. At first, I almost tossed it straight into the trash. Around here, HOA letters usually mean someone complaining about mailbox colors or grass height. Nothing serious. But when I opened the envelope and saw the bold words across the top of the page, I realized this one was different. Notice of intent to place a lien on property. According to the letter, I owed the Homeowners Association nearly $3,800 in fines and penalties. They claimed my farm equipment violated community aesthetic standards. Apparently, why my tractor had been parked where it could be seen from the road. And my storage barn didn't match the approved architectural style of the neighborhood. I read the letter twice, then I laughed again, because there was just one small problem with their plan. They had absolutely no idea who actually owned the road their entire neighborhood used every single day. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. If your HOA tried to put a lien on your property over something this ridiculous, what would you do? Would you fight it, or just pay the fine to avoid the headache? Let me know what you think, and if you enjoy real HOA drama stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more. Now back to the story. My family bought this land in 1978. Back then, the area looked completely different. There were no subdivisions, no neat rows of houses, and definitely no HOA rules about how tall your grass should be. There were just farms. Wide open fields stretched for miles. Gravel roads cut through the countryside, and old barns stood scattered across the landscape. My father spent most of his life working this land, growing corn and soybeans while slowly expanding the property whenever nearby farmland went up for sale. The paved subdivision behind my farm didn't appear until decades later. When developers decided to build the neighborhood, they quickly ran into a problem. They needed access to the county highway. But the only practical route to that highway ran straight across our property. So the developers came to my father with a proposal. They asked for permission to build a road connecting their future neighborhood to the highway. After a few meetings, they worked out an agreement. The neighborhood would be allowed to use the road, but the land underneath it would still belong to our farm. Everything was written clearly in legal documents and filed with the county. For decades, that arrangement worked perfectly fine. Then Melissa Crane moved into the neighborhood. Melissa arrived about a year earlier and wasted no time getting involved in HOA politics. Within a few months, she became president of the Homeowners Association, and once she had that position, she treated the neighborhood like it was her personal project. She walked the streets like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, inspecting houses and writing violation notices. Lawns that were slightly too tall, trash cans visible from the street, or a car parked in the wrong spot were enough to earn someone a letter from the HOA. Some neighbors joked that Melissa treated HOA rules like a full-time police job. Most residents didn't like her, but they paid the fines anyway just to avoid the hassle. Melissa seemed to enjoy the authority. Unfortunately for her, she eventually decided to extend that authority beyond the subdivision, right onto my farm. A few days after the lien notice arrived, I saw a black SUV parked near the edge of my property. Melissa stood beside, wearing oversized sunglasses, staring at my t-shirt, which had personally offended her. When I pulled up in my truck, she immediately held up a copy of the HOA letter. "You've ignored several violation notices," she said sharply. "I don't remember receiving any," I replied. "Well, you have," she continued. "And if the fines aren't paid, the HOA will proceed with placing a lien on this property." I leaned against my truck and looked toward the paved road stretching behind her. "You're trying to find a farm," I said slowly, "for having a tractor." "It's visible from the neighborhood road," she replied. "That violates community standards." I pointed toward the pavement behind her. "You mean that road?" "Yes," she said confidently, "our road." That was the moment I realized something important. She had absolutely no idea. I didn't argue with her. I didn't explain the easement or the property records. Instead, I simply gave a small shrug and said 2 words. "Go ahead." She looked confused. "You're refusing to comply?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm just curious to see how this plays out." 3 weeks later, the official Lien paperwork arrived. Melissa didn't just mail it this time. She showed up at my front door personally with 2 other HOA board members standing behind her. "We warned you," she said with a smug smile. I took the papers, thanked them politely, and closed the door. Then I made a phone call. About 10 days later, 2 county trucks pulled up to the entrance of the subdivision. Workers stepped out carrying survey equipment. Bright orange flags were placed along the edges of the pavement, while the crew began measuring the road that ran from the highway across my land and straight into the neighborhood. It didn't take long for people to notice. Neighbors stepped outside their houses, watching the activity with confused expressions. Cars slowed down as drivers passed the survey crew. Within minutes, Melissa appeared at the entrance of the neighborhood, asking the workers what they were doing. I watched the entire scene from my front porch. The surveyors spent hours measuring the road, marking boundaries, and placing bright flags along both sides of the pavement. By the time they finished, the entrance to the subdivision looked like a construction zone. The next morning, my attorney filed a response to the HOA's Lien notice. Attached to the filing were copies of the original easement agreement, county property records, and the results of the new survey. Together, the documents confirmed something very simple. The paved road connecting the neighborhood to the highway sat entirely on land owned by my farm. The subdivision had the legal right to use the road, but the land underneath it belonged to me. 3 days later, Melissa showed up again. This time, she wasn't smiling. "You knew about this," she said angrily. "Of course," I replied. "You should have told us." I shrugged. "You didn't ask." She paced back and forth for a moment before pointing toward the road. "The road is for public access," she said. "Easement access," I corrected. Very specific wording, and that wording mattered because easements come with conditions. If the party benefiting from the easement interferes with the property owner or tries to claim control over land they don't own, things can get legally complicated very quickly. My attorney sent the HOA board a short letter. We simply asked for 3 things. First, the immediate withdrawal of the lien. Second, written confirmation that my farm property was not subject to HOA authority. Third, reimbursement of the legal costs required to defend against their lien attempt. Otherwise, we would begin reviewing whether the HOA's actions had interfered with the legal easement agreement governing the road. The HOA board held an emergency meeting the following week. According to several residents who attended, it did not go well for Mellies. Apparently, she had never reviewed the original development records when she became HOA president. She simply assumed the road belonged to the neighborhood. Once the rest of the board saw the property documents and survey results, they realized how serious the mistake was. Without that road, the entire subdivision would have no legal access to the county highway. None. A few days later, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. This one looked very different from the first. Inside was a formal letter from the HOA board stating that the lien notice had been withdrawn. All fines were canceled immediately. The board acknowledged that my farm existed outside the authority of the HOA, and they included a check covering my legal expenses. Melissa's name was still printed at the bottom as the HOA president. But the signature looked rushed, almost forced. A week later, the neighborhood held another meeting. This time it wasn't about my farm, it was about leadership. By the end of that meeting, Melissa Crane was no longer the president of the Homeowners Association. These days, things are quiet again. Every morning, cars from the subdivision drive down the same paved road on their way to work, school, and the grocery store. Most of the residents wave when they pass my fields. Some even slow down to chat for a minute while I'm working near the road. And every once in a while, someone new to the neighborhood will ask why the HOA rules don't seem to apply to my property. The longtime residents usually just smile and give the same simple answer, because that farmer owns the road. And if you enjoyed this story, tell me in the comments, would your HOA ever try something like this? And don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you want to hear more real neighborhood drama like this.